The girl wasn't supposed to be there. Jacob Mercer stood in the doorway of his cabin, lantern raised, staring at the small figure huddled on his porch. She sat with her knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight around her shins, face buried in the faded blue of her dress. Her breathing was shallow, rhythmic, like she'd been crying long enough that her body had memorized the pattern. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched the way the lamplight caught the dust in her hair, the torn hem of her sleeve, the blood-dried brown along her knuckles. Behind him, the fire in the hearth crackled low. The wind outside pressed against the cabin walls, testing the seams. It was the kind of night that made men think about God and whether he was listening. "You heard?" Jacob finally asked, his voice rough from disuse. She didn't answer. Didn't even lift her head. He set the lantern on the porch rail and crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. Up close he could see she was young, maybe 16, maybe less. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, revealing a bruise that spread like spilled ink across her collarbone. Her feet were bare, caked in mud and worse. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, "but I need to know if you're bleeding, if you need a doctor." Still nothing. Jacob exhaled slowly, glancing out toward the dark expanse of his ranch. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles east. The nearest town was 10 miles south, and it wasn't the kind of place that looked kindly on questions, especially not the kind that started with a girl showing up alone in the dead of night. "Can you stand?" he asked. This time she moved. Just barely. Her head lifted, and he saw her face for the first time, pale, streaked with dirt and tears, eyes wide and hollow like she'd seen something that couldn't be unseen. "I'm scared to sleep alone," she whispered. Jacob froze. The words were so soft he almost missed them, but they hung in the air between them like a prayer spoken too late. He didn't ask why, didn't ask where she'd come from or who she was running from. He just stood, held out his hand and waited. After a long moment, she took it. Her fingers were cold. Trembling, he helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. She smelled like smoke and sweat and fear, the kind of smell that clung to people who'd been running longer than they'd been walking. Inside, the cabin was small but clean. A single room with a bed in the corner, a table and 2 chairs, a wood stove, and a shelf lined with books Jacob hadn't touched in years. He guided her to the chair nearest the fire and draped a wool blanket over her shoulders. She pulled it tight around herself, staring into the flames. Jacob filled a tin cup with water from the pitcher and set it on the table in front of her. She didn't touch it. "You got a name?" he asked. She nodded, but didn't say it. "Someone looking for you." Another nod. This one slower, heavier. Jacob ran a hand over his jaw, feeling the scrape of stubble, the weight of a decision he hadn't asked for. He'd been alone on this ranch for 3 years now, ever since his wife died, and the silence became easier than the memories. He didn't want trouble, didn't want questions, didn't want to be the man standing between someone and whatever they were running from, but he looked at the girl, at the way her hands shook as she clutched the blanket, and he knew he didn't have a choice. "You can sleep in the bed," he said. "I'll take the floor." Her eyes snapped to his, wide with something that looked like disbelief. "I won't touch you," he added. "You got my word on that." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for something, a lie maybe, or the kind of cruelty she'd learned to recognize. Whatever she was looking for, she didn't find it. She nodded once, small and uncertain. Jacob turned away, busying himself with pulling a bedroll from the chest in the corner. He unrolled it on the floor near the stove, laying out a thin pillow and an extra blanket. When he glanced back, the girl was still sitting, still staring into the fire. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Jacob, Jacob, Jacob, like she was testing the weight of it. Then softer, "Thank you." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and settled onto the bedroll, boots still on, rifle within arm's reach. The girl stayed in the chair for another hour, maybe longer, before she finally rose and crossed to the bed. She lay down on top of the quilt, fully dressed, curled on her side facing the wall. Jacob stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind and the faint hitch in her breathing. He didn't sleep, didn't even try, because somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that sunrise would bring something he wasn't ready for. And he was right. The knock came just after dawn, hard, deliberate, the kind of knock that didn't wait for an answer. Jacob was on his feet before the second blow landed, rifle in hand. The girl sat up in bed, eyes wide, face drained of color. "Stay here." he said. He crossed to the door and opened it just enough to see the man standing on his porch. Sheriff Dalton Hayes, tall, clean-shaven, with a badge pinned to his vest and a jaw set like stone. "Morning, Mercer," Hayes said. His tone was pleasant, but his eyes weren't. "Got a report last night. Girl went missing from town. Young thing, dark hair, about 16. You seen anyone like that?" Jacob's grip tightened on the rifle. "Can't say I have." Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mind if I take a look around?" "I do, actually." The smile faded. "That's so. My land, my cabin. You want to search it. You'll need more than a report." Hayes stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You hiding something, Mercer?" Jacob didn't blink. "I'm protecting my privacy. There are law against that." For a moment, neither man moved. Then Hayes stepped back, tipping his hat. "I'll be back. And when I am, I'll have more than a polite request." Before he rode off, he looked back at the cabin one last time, eyes lingering on the window. Jacob closed the door and locked it. Behind him, the girl was standing, blanket clutched around her shoulders, trembling from head to foot. "He's going to come back," she whispered. Jacob set the rifle down and turned to face her. "I know. And when he does, I'll figure it out." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You don't understand. You can't." "Then help me understand," Jacob said quietly. "Tell me who you are. Tell me what happened." She opened her mouth, then closed it, looked away. "I can't protect you if I don't know what I'm up against," he added. She was silent for a long time. Then finally she spoke. "My name is Lily, and the man who's looking for me, he's going to kill me when he finds me." Jacob didn't ask who the man was. Not yet. He just nodded, jaw tight, and moved to the window. Through the gap in the curtain, he watched the dust trail left by Sheriff Hayes disappear into the distance. "How long's he been after you?" Jacob asked. "Since yesterday," Lily said. Her voice was small, threadbare. "I ran all night." Jacob turned back to her. "Who is he?" She hesitated, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. "His name's Caleb Rourke. He owns the saloon in town, and the hotel, and half the shops on Main Street." Jacob knew the name. Everyone within 50 miles knew the name. Caleb Rourke was the kind of man who smiled when he shook your hand and made sure you felt the knife against your ribs at the same time. "What's he want with you?" Lily's face crumpled. "He bought me." The words hit Jacob like a fist to the gut. He didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. "My father owed him money," she continued, voice cracking. "A lot of money. And when he couldn't pay, Rock said he'd forgive the debt if I came to work for him." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing dirt across her cheek. "I thought he meant the saloon, serving drinks, cleaning tables. But when I got there, he took me upstairs, and he said she couldn't finish, didn't need to." Jacob's hands curled into fists. "Where's your father now?" "Dead. 3 days ago." "Rourke said it was an accident, but I know it wasn't." She looked up at him, eyes red and desperate. "I tried to run that night, but he caught me, locked me in a room. Said if I tried again, he'd make sure I never left town. So I waited, and last night I broke the window and climbed out." Jacob exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of it settle over him. "This wasn't just trouble. This was the kind of trouble that followed you, burned down your life, and left nothing but ash." "You know what you're asking me to do," he said quietly. Lily nodded. "I'm asking you to let me stay, just for a few days, until I can figure out where to go. And when Rourke comes looking, I'll say you didn't know. I'll say I snuck in while you were asleep. I'll say whatever you want me to say." Jacob shook his head. "Won't matter what you say. Men like Rourke don't care about the truth. They care about what they own. And if he thinks you're here, he didn't finish, didn't need to." Lily stood, letting the blanket fall from her shoulders. "Then I'll leave. Right now, I won't put you in danger." But as she moved toward the door, Jacob stepped in front of her. "You're not going anywhere," he said. She looked up at him, confused. "But you just said—" "I said it's dangerous. I didn't say I wouldn't help." For a moment, she just stared at him. Then her face crumpled and she broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Jacob stood there, awkward and uncertain, before finally resting a hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're safe here." She shook her head. "No one's safe from him." "Maybe not," Jacob admitted. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to throw you back to the wolves." By midday, word had already started to spread. Jacob rode into town for supplies, keeping his hat low and his eyes down. The general store was quiet, but he could feel the weight of stairs as he moved through the aisles. At the count of the clock, a thin man named Ezra rang up his order without a word. "Heard the sheriff was out your way this morning," Ezra said as he bagged the flour and beans. Jacob didn't look up. "That's so. Yep, heard he was asking about a girl. Don't know anything about that." Ezra leaned in, lowering his voice. "Look, Mercer, I'm not trying to stir the pot, but if you're hiding her, you should know Rourke's offering a reward. $200. And folks in this town, well, $200 is a lot of money." Jacob met his eyes. "Good to know." He paid, took the supplies, and walked out. But as he loaded the bags onto his horse, he felt it, the prickle of eyes on his back, the whisper of voices just out of earshot. The town was watching, and the town was talking. By the time he got back to the cabin, the sun was low on the horizon. Lily was sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees, staring out at the empty land. "You shouldn't be out here," Jacob said as he dismounted. "I know," she said, "but I couldn't stay inside anymore. It felt like the walls were closing in." Jacob unloaded the supplies and carried them inside. Lily followed, closing the door behind them. "What did you hear in town?" she asked. Jacob set the bags on the table. "Rourke's offering a reward. $200. Her face went pale. "Then they'll turn me in." "Maybe," Jacob said. "Or maybe they'll just keep talking. Either way, we need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Jacob pulled the rifle from the rack above the door and checked the barrel. "For when he comes." Lily's breath hitched. "You really think he will?" Jacob didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night he sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the darkness. Lily lay in the bed, curled on her side, but he could tell she wasn't sleeping. Her breathing was too shallow, too quick. "Jacob," she whispered. "Yeah, why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because no one helped my wife when she needed it. And I'm not going to let that happen again." Lily didn't respond, but he heard her breathing slow just a little. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere in the distance, hoofbeats echoed through the night. Oh, they came at dawn. Jacob woke to the sound of horses, too many horses. He was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand, moving to the window. Through the crack in the curtain, he counted 6 riders, maybe 7, fanned out in a loose semicircle around the cabin. At the center sat Caleb Rourke. He was older than Jacob expected, maybe 50, with silver threading through his dark hair and a face carved from stone. He wore a black coat and a white shirt buttoned to the throat, looking more like a preacher than a predator. His eyes were cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that measured a man's worth in dollars and debts. "Mercer!" Rourke's voice cut through the morning air, smooth and sharp. "I know she's in there. Send her out and we'll leave peacefully." Jacob didn't answer. Just checked the rifle and moved to the door, positioning himself where he could see without being seen. Lily was awake, sitting up in bed, face drained of color. "He found me," she whispered. "Stay quiet," Jacob said. "Don't move unless I tell you to." Rourke dismounted, boots hitting the dirt with a deliberate thud. He walked toward the cabin, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Mercer. I'm just here to collect what's mine." "She's not yours," Jacob called through the door. Rourke stopped, tilting his head. "Is that so?" "Because her father signed a contract. Legal and binding. She belongs to me until her debt is paid. Her father's dead, which makes the debt hers." Jacob's jaw tightened. "She's not property." Rourke smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Jacob's skin crawl. "In the eyes of the law, she is, and if you're harboring her, that makes you an accomplice. Sheriff Hayes can explain it to you if you'd like. He's right here." Jacob's gaze shifted to the riders. Sure enough, Sheriff Hayes sat among them, badge glinting in the early light. Their eyes met, and Hayes gave a small, almost apologetic shrug. "You got a choice, Mercer," Rourke continued. "Send her out and this ends. Keep her, and I'll have the sheriff arrest you for theft and obstruction. Then I'll take her anyway." Jacob didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, rifle steady, mind racing. Behind him, Lily stood and crossed to the door. "I'll go," she said quietly. "No," Jacob said. "If I don't, they'll kill you. They'll kill you if you do." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "At least you'll be alive." Before Jacob could stop her, she reached for the door handle. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her back. "I said no." "Mercer," Rourke's voice was sharper now, edged with impatience. "Send her out or I'll burn you out." Jacob looked at Lily, then back at the door. His mind churned through options, scenarios, outcomes. None of them were good. "You got 10 seconds, Rourke said. 10, 9. Jacob stepped in front of Lily, blocking her from the door. If you want her, you'll have to come through me. Rook stopped counting. For a moment, there was only silence. Fool. Then he laughed. Low, cold, humorless. You're a fool, Mercer. Maybe. You really think you can fight all of us? I think I can try. Rook's smile faded. He turned to the riders. Torch it. One of the men dismounted, pulling a torch from his saddlebag. He lit it with a match, flames crackling to life. Jacob's pulse hammered in his ears. He raised the rifle, aiming through the gap in the door. First man who gets close enough to throw that torch is the first man who dies, Jacob said. The rider hesitated, glancing at Rook. Rook's eyes narrowed. But, I'll shoot an unarmed man? I'll shoot a man trying to burn me alive, Jacob corrected. Your choice. For a long moment no one moved. Then Rook sighed, shaking his head. You're making this harder than it needs to be. He nodded to the rider, who took a step forward. Jacob squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the air, kicking up dirt 2 feet in front of the man. He stumbled back, dropping the torch. The flames sputtered in the dirt. Next one won't miss, Jacob said. Rook's jaw tightened. Sheriff, arrest him. Hayes shifted in his saddle, looking uncomfortable. On what charge? Obstruction, assault. I don't care. Just do your job. Hayes hesitated, then dismounted slowly. He walked toward the cabin, hands raised. Mercer, don't make this worse than it has to be. Go back to town, Hayes, Jacob said. This doesn't concern you. It does if Rook says it does. You really going to arrest a man for protecting a girl from being sold? Hayes stopped jaw working. It's not that simple. Yeah, Jacob said quietly. It is. Hayes stood there caught between duty and conscience. Then he turned and walked back to his horse. I'm not arresting anyone today, Rook. You want her, you'll have to take her yourself. Rook's face darkened. You're refusing a direct order. I'm refusing to be part of this, Hayes said. He mounted his horse and rode off without looking back. Rook watched him go, fury etched into every line of his face. Then he turned back to the cabin. Fine, we'll do this the hard way. He gestured to the remaining riders. They spread out, surrounding the cabin from all sides. Jacob's stomach sank. He could hold them off from the front, but if they came from behind, from the sides... Jacob, Lily whispered, there's a root cellar under the kitchen. Jacob glanced at her. Where? Under the rug. There's a trapdoor. Jacob moved quickly, pulling the rug aside. Sure enough, a wooden trapdoor was set into the floor. He yanked it open, revealing a dark, narrow space below. Get in, he said. What about you? I'll hold them off. They'll kill you. Then they'll kill me. He looked at her, jaw set. But they won't get you. Lily's face crumpled. Jacob, go. She hesitated, then climbed down into the cellar. Jacob closed the trapdoor and kicked the rug back over it just as the first window shattered. A torch sailed through, landing on the floor. Flames licked across the wood. Jacob grabbed a blanket and smothered it. But 2 more windows broke, 2 more torches flying in. The cabin was burning. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Jacob grabbed his rifle and kicked the door open, firing into the riders. One man fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, taking cover. Jacob stumbled out onto the porch, coughing, eyes streaming. The heat at his back was unbearable. He raised the rifle again, but a shot rang out and pain exploded through his side. He went down hard, vision blurring. Blood soaked through his shirt, hot and sticky. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. Rook walked toward him, gun in hand, smile curling at the edges of his mouth. Where is she, Mercer? Jacob didn't answer, just glared up at him, jaw tight. Rook crouched down, pressing the barrel of the gun against Jacob's forehead. Last chance. Jacob spat blood his feet. Go to hell. Rook's finger tightened on the trigger, and then a voice rang out from behind them. Let him go. Rook turned. Standing 20 feet away, rifle raised, was Sheriff Hayes. And behind him a dozen men from town, farmers, shopkeepers, men who'd had enough. This is over, Rook, Hayes said. Ride out, now. Rook stood slowly, holstering his gun. You're making a mistake, Sheriff. Maybe, Hayes said, but it's my mistake to make. Rook stared at him for a long moment. Then he mounted his horse and rode off, the remaining riders following. Jacob collapsed, breath ragged. Hands reached for him, lifting him, carrying him inside. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Lily's face, streaked with tears, whispering his name. Jacob woke to the smell of wood smoke and something bitter. Medicine, maybe, or old coffee. His side throbbed with each breath, a deep grinding ache that radiated through his ribs. When he tried to move, pain shot through him like lightning, and he gasped, falling back against the pillow. Don't! a voice said. Soft, familiar. He turned his head, blinking through the haze. Lily sat beside the bed, a damp cloth in her hands, her face pale and drawn. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes, and her hair was tied back with a piece of frayed ribbon. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. How long? Jacob rasped. 3 days, she said quietly. The doctor said the bullet went clean through. No infection yet, but you lost a lot of blood. Jacob tried to sit up again, but she placed a hand on his chest, gentle but firm. I said, don't. You'll tear the stitches. He exhaled slowly, sinking back down. The cabin was different now, cleaner somehow. The floor had been scrubbed, the windows patched with canvas, the smell of smoke mostly gone. A pot bubbled on the stove, steam curling toward the rafters. What happened? He asked. Lily wrung out the cloth, dabbing at his forehead. Sheriff Hayes came back with half the town. The town. They put out the fire before it could take the whole cabin. Then they carried you inside and brought the doctor. She paused, lips pressed into a thin line. Rourke's gone. For now. He'll come back. I know. Jacob studied her face, the worry etched into every line. You should have run while you had the chance. He shook her head, setting the cloth aside. And leave you to die, after everything you did for me. I'm not worth dying for. Maybe not, she said quietly, but you're worth staying for. Something in her voice made Jacob's chest tighten, not from pain, but from something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. He looked away, jaw working. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know. Then why? Because you're the first person who didn't look at me like I was something to be bought or sold, she said, voice cracking. You looked at me like I was a person, and I don't know how to repay that. Jacob was quiet for a long time. Then he said, you already did. You stayed. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, turning away. I'll get you some broth. She crossed to the stove, ladling soup into a tin bowl. Her hands shook as she carried it back, setting it on the table beside the bed. Jacob watched her, noticing the way she moved, careful, deliberate, like she was afraid of breaking something. Lily, he said. She looked at him. Thank you. She nodded, a small, fragile smile touching her lips. Then she sat back down, pulling the blanket over her lap, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked like she might actually believe she was safe. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Lily tended to Jacob's wound, changing the bandages, making sure he ate and drank. She was quiet most of the time, moving through the cabin like a ghost, but every now and then she'd say something, small observations, fragments of memory, and Jacob would listen, piecing together the shape of her life before Rourke. She'd grown up in a town 2 days. Ride west. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father had raised her alone, working as a blacksmith. He said it was just for a year, Lily said one evening, sitting by the window, watching the sunset. He said if I worked for him, my father's debts would be cleared. And I believed him. I was so stupid. You weren't stupid, Jacob said. You were desperate. There's a difference. There's a difference. She looked at him, eyes searching. Do you think he'll ever stop looking for me? Jacob didn't answer right away. He wanted to lie, to tell her it would be okay, that Rourke would give up and move on. But he'd never been good at lying. No, he said finally. Men like Rourke don't stop. Not until they get what they want. Lily nodded like she'd expected that answer. Then I'll have to leave. Go somewhere he can't find me. Where? I don't know. California maybe. Or Mexico. That's a long way to go alone. I'll manage. Jacob shifted, wincing as pain flared through his side. Or you could stay. Lily turned, eyes wide. Stay, Jacob repeated. Here, on the ranch, I could use the help and you'd be safer here than out there. Jacob, I can't. Jacob, I can't. Why not? I won't put you in danger again. I'm already in danger again. I'm already in danger, Jacob said. And I'd rather face it with you here than spend the rest of my life wondering if you made it. Lily stared at him, something raw and vulnerable flickering across her face. Then she looked away, wiping at her eyes. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, what if he comes back? Then we'll face him together. Lily's breath hitched, and she turned back to him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why are you doing this? Jacob met her gaze, steady and sure, because everyone deserves a place to call home. No, and if you'll have it, this can be yours. For a moment she just stood there, trembling. Then she crossed the room, knelt beside the bed and took his hand in hers. Her fingers were small, calloused, warm. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Jacob squeezed her hand, and for the first time in 3 years, The silence in the cabin didn't feel quite so heavy. That night a storm rolled in, rain hammered the roof, thunder shaking the walls, the wind howled through the cracks, rattling the windows. Lily sat by the fire, knees drawn to her chest, staring into the flames. "You all right?" Jacob asked from the bed. She nodded but didn't look at him. "I used to hate storms when I was little. My mother would hold me until they passed. What would she say? May. That the thunder was just the sky talking, and the lightning was God reminding us he was still there." Jacob smiled faintly. "Sounds like a wise woman." She was. Lily's voice was soft, distant. "I wish she was here now." "So do I." Lily looked at him then, eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Jacob." "Yeah? I'm scared to sleep alone." The words hung in the air, familiar and aching. Jacob's chest tightened, and he nodded toward the other side of the bed. "Then don't." Lily hesitated, then stood and crossed to the bed. She lay down beside him, careful not to jostle his wound, pulling the blanket over both of them. Jacob shifted, making room, and she curled against his side, head resting on his shoulder. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. He could feel her trembling. "It's all right," he murmured. "I've got you." And slowly, gradually, she stopped shaking. Her breathing evened out, and she fell asleep there, tucked against him, safe and warm. Jacob stared at the ceiling, listening to the storm rage outside, and didn't let go. The storm passed by morning, leaving the land washed clean and gleaming under a pale sun. Jacob woke to the sound of birds and the smell of fresh coffee. He turned his head and found Lily standing by the stove, pouring 2 cups. "You're up early," he said, voice rough with sleep. She glanced over her shoulder, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Couldn't sleep anymore, figured I'd make myself useful." She brought the coffee over, handing him a cup. He took it, inhaling the bitter warmth, and watched as she settled into the chair beside the bed. "How's the wound?" she asked. "Better." He shifted, testing the ache in his side. It was still there, but duller now. "Manageable. I think I can stand today." "Don't push it. I'll be careful." They drank in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, the sun climbed higher, painting the world in shades of gold and green. It felt like a new beginning, like maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. But Jacob knew better. He set his cup down and looked at Lily. "We need to talk about what happens next." She nodded like she'd been waiting for this. "I know. Rex's not going to let this go. And when he comes back—" "If he comes back," Lily corrected. "When?" Jacob insisted. "We need to be ready." Lily set her cup down, folding her hands in her lap. "What do you suggest?" "We leave, both of us, head west, find someplace he can't reach." Lily shook her head. "I won't ask you to give up your home. This cabin's just wood and nails." Jacob said, "You're what matters." Her eyes filled with tears and she looked away, swallowing hard. "Jacob," a knock at the door cut her off. Jacob's hand went to the rifle leaning against the bed. Lily stood, face pale. They exchanged a glance, and Jacob nodded. She moved to the door, cracking it open just enough to see. It was Sheriff Hayes. He stood alone, hat in hand, looking weary and worn. "Can I come in?" Lily hesitated, then stepped aside. Hayes entered, closing the door behind him. He looked at Jacob, then at Lily, then back to Jacob. "You'd like hell," Hayes said. "Feel like it too," Jacob replied. "What do you want, Sheriff?" Hayes ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "I came to tell you it's over. Rock's gone." Jacob frowned. "Gone where?" "Dead." The word hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water. Lily's breath hitched. Jacob stared at Hayes, searching for a lie. He didn't find one. "What happened?" Jacob asked. Hayes pulled out a chair and sat down, setting his hat on the table. 2 nights ago, someone put a bullet through his chest. Found him in his office, slumped over his desk. No witnesses, no suspects. Jacob's jaw tightened. "And you think I don't think anything," Hayes interrupted. "You were here bleeding out, barely able to stand. You didn't kill him." He paused, then added quietly, "But someone did. Someone who thought he had it coming." Jacob glanced at Lily. Her face was unreadable, but her hands were trembling. "What happens now?" Jacob asked. Hayes shrugged. As shrugged. "Investigation's still open, but between you and me, nobody's trying too hard to solve it. Rourke had a lot of enemies. Could have been anyone." He stood, picking up his hat. "Point is, Lily's free. No debt, no contract, no one coming after her." He looked at her directly. "You're your own person now. Do with that what you will." Lily's lips parted, but no sound came out. She just stood there, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Hayes nodded to Jacob. "Take care of yourself, Mercer. And her." "I will." Hayes left, closing the door behind him. The cabin fell silent. Lily turned to Jacob, eyes wide and disbelieving. "He's really gone." Jacob nodded. "He's really gone." She collapsed into the chair, sobbing into her hands. Jacob watched her, chest tight, wishing he could take away the years of fear and pain. But all he could do was sit there and let her cry, let her finally release everything she'd been holding in. When the sobs finally subsided, she looked up at him, face red and tear-streaked. "What do I do now?" Jacob reached out, taking a hand in his. "Whatever you want." She stared at their joined hands, then at him. "I don't even know what that is." "Then we'll figure it out," Jacob said quietly. "Together." A fragile smile broke across her face, trembling but real. "Together, together, together." 6 months later, the ranch had changed. The cabin had been rebuilt, stronger, larger, with new windows and a fresh coat of paint. The barn had been repaired, and there were chickens in the yard, a vegetable garden out back, and 2 new horses in the corral. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Jacob stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills. His side had healed, leaving a scar he barely noticed anymore. Behind him the door opened, and Lily stepped out, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and settled into the chair beside him, tucking her feet under her. Her hair was longer now, tied back with a blue ribbon he'd bought in town. She looked different, lighter, somehow, like the weight she'd been carrying had finally lifted. "You think we'll have enough grain for winter?" she asked. "If the weather holds," Jacob said. "And if it doesn't, we'll manage." She smiled, sipping her coffee. "We always do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to red to purple. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the wind carried the smell of earth and rain. "Jacob," Lily said softly. "Yeah, do you ever regret it?" "Letting me stay." Jacob looked at her, at the way the fading light caught in her hair, at the quiet strength in her eyes. "Not once." She reached over, taking his hand in hers. "Good, because I don't either." He squeezed her hand, and they sat there together, watching the world settle into night. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Jacob felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Hope. Years later, when travelers passed through and asked about the quiet ranch tucked into the hills, the people in town would tell them about the rancher who'd risked everything for a girl he didn't know. They'd talk about the fire, the standoff, the way half the town had stood up to a man they'd been afraid of for years. But the part they remembered most, the part that stuck, was the ending. Because when those travelers asked what happened to the girl, the townsfolk would smile and say, "She stayed. And she's still there." And if you rode out to the ranch at sunset, you'd see them, 2 figures on the porch, sitting side by side, watching the sky turn to gold. Still together, still holding on, and they never let go.